Tonight we're going to be looking at a passage in Galatians chapter 5, verses 7 to 12. If you've got your Bibles with you, you can read along, otherwise I'll read it for us. So Galatians 5, 7 through to 12. You were running a good race. Who cut in on you to keep you from obeying the truth? That kind of persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. A little yeast works through the whole batch of dough. I am confident in the Lord that he will take no other view. The one who is throwing you into confusion, whoever that may be, will have to pay the penalty. Brothers and sisters, if I am still preaching circumcision, why am I still being persecuted? In that case, the offence of the cross has been abolished. As for those agitators, I wish they would go the whole way and emasculate themselves. It's a pretty fiery, pretty powerful statement from Paul. He's very serious about this, and we're really going to be focusing in this talk just on one verse, verse 7. It's about running. Now, I'm not a watcher of running. The Olympics don't drag me in. The stall gift doesn't kind of register on my must-watch calendar. I enjoy running. I enjoyed participating in as many track and field events as I could. I ran the short distance, I ran the long distance. I did as much of that as I could. I did it for fun. I enjoyed it during school. And even when I did well, I never took it too seriously. I didn't train. I just ran on the day. That's just what I did. I took it very lightly and I did it for fun. If I was going to take it seriously, and for those who do take it seriously, they know that there's both mental and there's physical. It's not just a physical thing, there's both. And for those at the highest level, they know it's more than just your own getting through the wall. It's not just running hard endurance-wise and the mental getting through the wall. It's actually tactics about running against other runners, making sure that you run in a way that makes it harder for them and that you don't allow them to make it harder for you to run. We caught up with a friend of ours in Canberra who was at Australian Institute of Sport. Now, we'd been with them in Victoria. We went to church together, and their family had moved to Queensland. A year later, we moved to Queensland. In that time, their second oldest, the one that we knew, he'd gone to Canberra to the Institute of Sport. And after a couple of years, we were also in Canberra, and we bumped into them. We hadn't spoken to them for years, or at least we hadn't spoken to him for years. We'd spoken to the parents, not to him for years. We bumped into him at the food court in Belconnen, which is kind of like the Eastland or Knox. That's kind of what it is. And he was with his then girlfriend, now wife. And we were talking with them and talking about what they were doing and asking them how things were and just catching up in general with him, but also wanting to get to know her a little bit. And he did the 400 and she did the 800. He kind of made the point that he doesn't understand why or how she would do an extra lap. And she kind of brought up the idea of tactics, I think, as a way to say that she was also smarter than him as well. Because in the 800 and above, you all go into the one lane. 400, you stay in your lanes, you run your 400 metres. In the 800, you all try to get into that inside lane. Makes a difference. You run less distance than everyone else if you can be in that inside lane. Now, everyone can be in there, but obviously only one person can be at the front. And her thought was, and kind of the way she talked about it, you try to get in front early. Because if you're in front, everyone is behind you, expending a heap more energy, jostling for position. They're spending more energy trying to dodge one another, trying not to bump into one another, potentially falling over each other. They're spending more energy and time trying to kind of change their line. If someone gets in front of them, they've got to slow down or change their direction. They've got to burn so much more energy, and they've got to start thinking about other people. It throws them off. And if somebody does try to get around you, if you're in front and somebody tries to get around you, as she said, keep them in pain. Because the more they're outside, you on the outside of the lane, they're running harder. They've got to work harder. So even if you have to work a little bit harder to keep them there, they're working harder than you. They're not in their line. They know they're not in their line. They know they're running further. That's the whole point. You try to get in front and stuff up the people behind you. That's kind of the tactics of it all. Now, that was interesting to me because I ran for fun. I never really thought about it, but that is the thing. Now, running isn't new. The AIS didn't come up with tactics for running. That would have been around a long time. In fact, the Olympics and running were one of the main forms of entertainment while the New Testament was being written. That's kind of what people watched. It was so common and so well known that Paul uses running races as a throwaway line, a line that he can just say, there it is, and everyone just understands what he's talking about. And it's the same for our passage now. Verse 7, You were running a good race. Who cut in on you to keep you from obeying the truth? Last week, we kind of talked about how the Gnostics, which is a Greek philosophical influence, had combined with a Jewish rule-keeping influence within the church to make this rather unique problem in the Colossians. It's not the problem in Galatian churches, it's not the problem in Galatia. Now, Galatia is in modern-day Turkey. It's kind of in the middle of the bit that goes around to Istanbul and on to kind of Europe. So if you're looking at Israel like this and the land goes round, it's just here. It's close to Israel. And that's part of the problem. There was a very strong Jewish influence, Jewish rule-keeping, law-keeping influence coming into the Galatian church. That's kind of the main issue. It's not the only time. This passage isn't the only time Paul has spoken about his disappointment in the Galatian churches, that they've kind of wandered away. So there's not just one church, there's a bunch of them, but they've kind of wandered away from the truth because of this influence. The arguments that Paul counters really do revolve around just Jewish law-keeping. The question is, the argument being put forward is whether the non-Jewish Christians could truly be included in the people of God. Now, for those who'd cut in, the Judaizers, the answer was no. If you were to truly follow God, if you were to truly be a Christian, then you also had to keep all the commands that God had given Israel. That was the argument they put forward. If you wanted to truly be the children of Abraham, if you really wanted to be the people of promise, if you wanted to be holy and right with God, follow Jesus, but also follow the law, become circumcised and follow the eating requirements. That's kind of the arguments they were putting forward. And the Galatians, even though they were running a good race, had let someone cut in front. They'd let someone kind of take them away from the core gospel, from what the gospel really is. Now I'm going to let you kind of flesh out the arguments that are being made and the issues and how Paul kind of deals with that in your studies. I'm just going to focus on something that actually is quite scary. It's something that is really important and is something that we need to be conscious of and aware of, and that is that the Galatians were running a good race. Now, good is important. They weren't ambivalent. They weren't ambivalent about Christ. They weren't flaky. They were running a good race. They were doing a good job. They weren't sitting on the fence. And even though they were doing good, and they were kind of doing good as far as following Jesus is concerned, they let someone get in their way. They let someone cut in front. They let someone kind of change their line. That was a big issue. It's a very serious warning for us, a serious warning against complacency. Right now, we are more isolated than normal. You know, Hebrews does tell us for a reason to not stop meeting with one another. To continue meeting together is really important. Now, obviously, we can't do that physically. We can't meet together physically, and we're doing that through technology, and it's really important. But we are still more vulnerable than normal. You know, there are those who want to devour and steal us away from Christ. You know, we need to be on our guard against Satan and those he uses to pull us away from following Jesus, from running the race. You may indeed be running a good race. You might be running a good race. If you don't think you are running a good race, I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to talk with you and help you strengthen your faith and encourage you so that you are and can run a good race. But even if you think you are running a good race, so were the Galatians. We still need to be vigilant so that no one cuts in. Our faith may be strong, our doctrine might be good, but we cannot get lazy and lose sight. The Galatians were also running a good race, but they had allowed somebody to cut in on them. That's really important for us. You know, we need to endure, we need to keep a watch and keep our line. We need to really make sure we've got it right. We need to spend our time thinking about the right things. We've just spent the last 2 weeks looking at a kind of a trustworthy saying of how we can share the gospel with someone and what that gospel is. And we need to know that and focus on that. Because any time we add to that, any time we think, being a follower of Jesus is believing in him and we insert whatever rule, we make it about works. We make our salvation about the things we can do and our works. Our salvation is not based on our works, but on the work of Christ. So we've got to be really careful around that. I mean, there are things that are good for us to do. There's things that we should be doing and there's things that are good for us to do, but they're in response to our faith. It's not a requirement of it. As soon as we say, yep, following Jesus is, or as soon as we hear someone say, following Jesus is all well and good, but also you've got to do, we're in trouble. That's where trouble starts. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9:24, do you not know that in a race all the runners run? Makes sense. But only one gets the prize. Run in such a way as to get the prize. No one running to win lets someone get in front of them. No chance. You just don't do that. If you want to win, stay in front. I mean, that's just true of life, isn't it? Make sure no one's in your way if you want to win. Not just running. I was playing video games with a few mates. We played Halo when we were younger. We'd all kind of get together. 4 of us would get together and we'd play Halo together. And the other day we caught up and played together. And if I was in the lead, I wanted to keep that lead. I didn't want anyone to get in front of me because then I might not win and they might. If you want to win, keep in front. Don't let anyone get in the way and distract you. Don't let anyone cut in front. Stay in front. Keep our focus on the prize. What Paul wants us to realize is that Jesus as the prize for our life and faith is worth working really hard for. Worth making sure that we focus on and keep others out of the way. It's a prize worth persevering for. And it's a prize that we want to make sure nothing can hinder us, nothing stops us, nothing distracts us or changes our line from it. No other prize is worthy enough. No other prize is worth as much. And there's no other way to Jesus. If someone comes along and says there's a better course, there's a better way to reach Jesus, to have salvation, then they're getting in the way. We need to keep our line and our eyes fixed on Christ, on the course that he's laid out for us. It's really important. The reason we should have Bible studies and continue to meet and talk about our life and faith with one another is to strengthen one another, to help keep each other on track, to encourage one another to refocus our energy, to make sure that we're spending our energy on the right things, that we're not burning excess energy and burning more and more energy on other things and kind of running out of steam following Christ. Even when we're running a good race, and even when somebody else is running a good race, we need to keep watch and remain vigilant. Can we encourage one another so that we don't lose sight of Christ, so that those around us and we as well might finish the race? We focus on the evangelism bit, and kind of that is a big deal, and we need to do that well. But it can't stop there. We've also got to walk with the people that we're talking with, Christians who are solid Christians and are running a good race, and those who are brand new Christians. We need to walk with them, encourage them so that they can keep that faith. 2 Timothy 4 is a moving chapter. I'm just going to finish with this thought. 2 Timothy 4 is a moving chapter. Reading it, you realise how personal Paul's letters are. Not just the pastoral ones, not just to Timothy, but all his letters. Even Galatians, Paul is pouring his life and his faith and his soul and his energy into this. It's why he's fiery, because he cares. These are personal letters. We kind of read them sometimes at a bit of an arm's length. We don't realise that they weren't written at arm's length by any stretch of the imagination. They're personal. They're invested, they're involved. And 2 Timothy 4 really brings that home. Paul knows he's about to die. He clearly knows he's about to die. It's just the way it's written, it just shows he knows he's nearing the end. And I truly hope that you and I can echo, when we come to our end, that you and I can echo the same sentiment and the same thing that Paul does in verse 7. I've fought the good fight. I've finished the race. I have kept the faith.